My husband left me in the hospital while I was pregnant, only to come back years later to claim our child. The fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway buzzed overhead, a sound that seemed to drill directly into my skull. I was 7 months pregnant. Before you find out what happens next, hit the subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We want to see just how far this life-changing story can reach. Sitting in a wheelchair because my blood pressure had spiked to dangerous levels. My ankles were swollen to the size of grapefruits, and I could feel the rhythmic, terrifying thrum of a headache behind my eyes. Preeclampsia. That was the word the doctor had used. It sounded clinical, but the fear in the nurse's eyes told me it was serious. My husband Greg stood next to me. He wasn't holding my hand. He was checking his watch. He had been checking his watch every 5 minutes since we arrived at the emergency room. "How long is this going to take, Clara?" he asked, his voice tight with irritation. "I have that meeting with the investors at 4. I can't be sitting here all day." I looked up at him, tears stinging my eyes. "Greg, the doctor said I might have to be induced. The baby is in distress. I need you here." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It wasn't a sigh of worry, it was a sigh of inconvenience. To him, my medical emergency was just another obstacle in his schedule. "Induced," Greg repeated, looking at the triage nurse who was strapping a blood pressure cuff to my arm. "Does that mean today? Right now?" The nurse nodded grimly. "Her readings are critical, sir. We are admitting her to the high-risk unit immediately. You should go move your car to the long-term lot and bring her bag up." Greg looked at me, then at the door. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing the birth of his son against his business deal. "Okay," he said, patting my shoulder awkwardly. "I'll go move the car. I'll grab some coffee too. I'll be right back." He didn't kiss me. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He just turned and walked toward the automatic doors. I watched him go, a sinking feeling in my gut that had nothing to do with my blood pressure. "He's just stressed," I whispered to myself. "He'll be back." The nurse looked at me with a pitying expression that I would come to know very well over the next few days. "Let's get you upstairs, honey," she said softly. 3 hours passed. I was hooked up to monitors and 4-line dripping magnesium into my veins to prevent seizures. The room was dark and quiet, except for the steady whoosh-whoosh of the fetal heart monitor. Every time the door opened, my head snapped up, expecting to see Greg. Every time it was just a nurse or a doctor. I called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him. "Where are you?" "They are prepping me for a C-section." No reply. The loneliness was suffocating. I was about to undergo major surgery to save our child, and the father was missing. My blood pressure wasn't going down. The stress was making it worse. "Is your husband coming?" the anesthesiologist asked as he prepped the spinal block. I had to swallow the lump in my throat to speak. He went to move the car," I lied. "He must have gotten stuck in traffic." The doctor didn't say anything, but I saw him exchange a look with the scrub nurse. They knew. Everyone knew. Our son Leo was born at 6:42 p.m. He was tiny, barely 4 pounds, and was whisked away to the NICU immediately. I didn't get to hold him. I just saw a flash of pink skin and heard a weak cry before he was gone. I lay in the recovery room, numb from the waist down and numb in my heart. I asked the nurse to hand me my phone. Still no texts from Greg. Finally, at 9 p.m. my phone buzzed. My heart leaped. I opened the message. It was from Greg. "Claire, I can't do this. The hospital, the stress, the baby, it's too much. I need to focus on my career right now. I'm not ready to be a father. I packed my things. I'm staying at a hotel. Don't call me." I stared at the screen. The words blurred as hot tears spilled down my cheeks. He hadn't gone to get coffee. He had gone to leave me. He had walked out on his wife and premature son because we were too much. The next week was a blur of physical pain and emotional devastation. I was discharged, but Leo had to stay in the NICU. I took a taxi home to our apartment, a taxi I could barely afford. When I walked in, the silence was deafening. Greg's closet was empty. His gaming console was gone. His toothbrush was missing. He had erased himself from our lives with surgical precision. I found an envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a check for $500 and a note. "For the medical bills. Good luck." $500. The hospital bill would be in the thousands. I sat on the floor of the nursery I had decorated alone, and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. I was 24, unemployed. I had quit to be a stay-at-home mom per Greg's request, and alone with a sick baby. But as I looked at the empty crib, a fire ignited in my chest. I wiped my face. Fine, I whispered to the empty room. We don't need him. The first few years were the hardest of my life. I moved into a studio apartment that smelled like damp carpet. I worked 2 jobs, waiting tables during the day and freelance editing at night while Leo slept. There were nights I didn't eat so I could buy formula. There were days I cried in the bathroom at work because I was so exhausted I was hallucinating. But Leo was the light. Despite his rocky start, he grew strong. He was smart, kind, and fiercely protective of me even as a toddler. He never asked about his father. I never brought him up. To Leo, our family was just us. And that was enough. By the time Leo was 5, I had saved enough to start a small catering business. I used my grandmother's recipes. It started slow, just birthday parties and local luncheons. But people loved the food. They loved the story of the single mom making it work. Slowly we climbed out of the hole Greg had left us in. 7 years later. Mom. Leo shouted, holding up a trophy. He was 7 years old now, with messy brown hair and a smile that lit up the entire soccer field. He had just scored the winning goal for his junior league team. I saw it, baby. That was amazing. I cheered, hugging him tight. I smelled of vanilla and flour. My business, Clara's Kitchen, was booming. We had just landed a contract to supply pastries to a chain of coffee shops. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were thrive. We walked to my car, a reliable SUV paid for in cash. Life was good. Peaceful. I had almost forgotten the sound of Greg's voice. I had almost forgotten the feeling of abandonment. But the past has a funny way of showing up when the sun is shining brightest. As I buckled Leo in, I noticed a black luxury sedan parked across the street. The window rolled down slowly. A man in sunglasses was watching us. My stomach dropped. I knew that jawline. I knew that arrogance. I drove home, checking my rearview mirror constantly. The black car didn't follow us, but the seed of panic had been planted. That night, after Leo went to bed, I sat in the kitchen with a glass of wine, staring at the door. Why no? Why, after 7 years of silence, Greg had signed the divorce papers via mail years ago. He had surrendered his rights to avoid paying child support. He was a ghost. My phone pinged. An email. Subject: reconnecting. My hand shook as I clicked it open. Clara, I saw the article about your business in the local paper. Congrats. You've done well. I also saw the photo of the boy. He looks like me. I think it's time we talk. I'm in town. Greg. I deleted the email immediately. He looks like me. Not Leo. Not our son. Just the boy. And he noticed because of a business article? He didn't care about us. He cared that we were successful. 2 days later, I was at my commercial kitchen, supervising a large order for a wedding. The air was thick with the smell of roasting chicken and rosemary. My assistant Sarah tapped me on the shoulder. Clara, there's a guy in the front office asking for you. He says he's family. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the front. Greg was standing there, looking older, heavier, but wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He looked around the office, taking in the awards on the wall, the busy staff, the hum of success. When he saw me, he smiled. That charming, slippery smile I used to fall for. Clara, he said smoothly. You look great. Motherhood agrees with you. Get out, I said, my voice dead calm. You have 5 seconds before I call the police. Greg laughed, holding up his hands. Whoa, easy. Is that how you greet an old friend? We aren't friends, I spat. You left me in a hospital while I was being cut open. You left your son to die in the NICU. You are nothing to us. I made a mistake, Greg said, stepping closer. I was young. I was scared. But I've changed, Claire. I've been watching you. You've built quite an empire here. And the boy. Leo, right? I hear he's quite the athlete. I saw him play. My blood ran cold. Stay away from my son, I hissed. If you go near him, I will end you. Greg's smile faded. He's my son too, Clara. You can't keep him from me. I have rights. You signed your rights away, I reminded him. I have the papers. You wanted 0 custody so you wouldn't have to pay a dime. You traded your son for a Porsche, Greg. Greg shrugged. Judges are sympathetic to fathers who want to make amends. especially fathers who have resources. My business is doing very well, Clara. I can give him things you can't. We don't want your things, I said, pointing to the door. Leave. Now. Greg straightened his tie. I'll leave. For today. But I'm filing a petition for visitation on Monday. I want to meet him. I want to be a dad. He turned and walked out. I watched him go, feeling like I was back in that hospital wheelchair, helpless and terrified. But then I looked at my hands. They were strong. They had kneaded thousands of pounds of dough. They had carried a child alone. I wasn't helpless anymore. I went straight to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. The best family law attorney in the city, a shark named Mr. Henderson. I paid his retainer with the emergency fund I had spent 7 years building. I sat in his leather chair and told him everything. The hospital, the check, the abandonment, the return. Mr. Henderson listened, taking notes. It's a classic case, he said. The resurfacing parent. Usually happens when the custodial parent comes into money, or the child shows some talent they can exploit. You said Leo is a soccer standout. He's the best in the league, I said. Scouts are already talking about him. There it is, Henderson said. Greg sees a future investment. He doesn't want a son, he wants a trophy. The legal papers arrived a week later. Petition for paternity and visitation. Greg was asking for 50-50 custody. He was claiming that I had withheld the child from him and that he had been suffering in silence for years. It was a work of fiction so bold it made me nauseous. I had to tell Leo. This was the part one dreaded most. I sat him down on the couch that evening. Leo, honey, we need to talk. He looked up from his homework. Is everything okay, Mom? Do you remember how I told you your dad wasn't ready to be a parent? I started. Leo nodded. Yeah. He left. Well, I took a deep breath. He's back. And he wants to see you. Leo went quiet. He was a smart kid. He processed things deeply. Why now? He asked. It was the same question I had asked. He says he's changed, I said carefully, trying not to poison the well even though I wanted to scream the truth. He wants to get to know you. Do I have to? Leo asked, looking small. I don't know him. You're my dad and my mom. My heart broke and swelled at the same time. I know, baby. But the court might say you have to meet him. Just once. But I will be there. I promise. Leo hugged me. I don't want him, he whispered. I'm happy with us. The first court hearing was a nightmare. Greg showed up with a team of lawyers. He looked like the picture of a grieving father. He cried on the stand. He told the judge that he had been depressed, that he had been lost, and that I had blocked his number, a lie. I just want to be part of Leo's life, Greg sobbed. I missed his first steps. I missed his first words. I don't want to miss any more. The judge, an older man who seemed to buy into the father's rights narrative, looked sympathetic. Miss Davis, the judge said to me. The court believes a child needs both parents. I am ordering supervised visitation. 1 hour twice a week. Starting immediately. I felt like I had been punched. Supervised visitation. It was a start, but it opened the door. Greg smirked at me as we left the courtroom. See, he whispered as he passed. I always get what I want. The first visit was at a court-appointed center. It was a sterile room with toys that looked abused. Leo sat on a chair, his arms crossed, looking at the floor. Greg came in carrying a giant bag of gifts. Video games, a new soccer ball, expensive sneakers. He was trying to buy him. Hey, champ. Greg boomed. Look what Dad got you. Leo didn't move. I don't need shoes, Leo said quietly. I have shoes. Mom bought them. Greg's smile faltered for a second, then returned. But these are Jordan's, son. The best. Just like you. He sat down, trying to put an arm around Leo. Leo flinched away. Why did you leave? Leo asked. He didn't look at the toys. He looked right into Greg's eyes. Greg blinked. He clearly hadn't expected to be challenged by a 7-year-old. I had to work, Leo. To make money for us. For your future. Mom worked too, Leo said. She worked 2 jobs. She didn't leave. Greg grew frustrated as the visits went on. Leo wasn't buying the act. He wasn't impressed by the money or the car. Greg started to get sloppy. During one visit, while I watched from behind the two-way mirror, I heard Greg whisper to Leo. You know, your mom holds you back. If you lived with me, you'd go to a private academy. Real coaches. You could be a pro. Don't you want to be a star? He was grooming him. He was trying to drive a wedge between us. I banged on the glass. The social worker jumped. He's manipulating him. I shouted. That's not parenting. But the social worker just wrote in her notebook. He's discussing educational opportunities, she said dryly. It's allowed. I needed leverage. Greg was slick, but everyone has secrets. I hired a private investigator. It cost a fortune, but I didn't care. I needed to know why he really came back. Was it just the soccer? Or was there something else? 2 weeks later, the PI handed me a folder. You were right to be suspicious, he said. Greg isn't doing as well as he claims. His empire is leveraged to the hilt. He's in debt. Massive gambling debts. And he paused. He needs a donor. A donor? I asked, feeling sick. Bone marrow, the PI said. Greg was diagnosed with a rare blood disorder 6 months ago. He needs a transplant. His siblings aren't a match. Back because he needs Leo to get tested. He doesn't want a son, Clara. He wants a spare part. I nearly threw up. It was worse than I thought. He didn't want to manage Leo's career. He wanted to harvest his biology. And he hadn't told the court. He hadn't told us. He was playing the loving father to save his own skin. The next court date was for the final custody ruling. Greg was confident. He was asking for full weekends now. He stood up and gave another heartfelt speech about bonding and legacy. When it was my lawyer's turn, Mr. Henderson stood up slowly. Your Honor, we have new evidence regarding Mr. Thompson's motivations. He walked to the bench and handed over the medical records the PI had obtained. The petitioner is suffering from a life-threatening illness. An illness he failed to disclose. An illness that requires a bone marrow transplant from a genetic relative. The judge frowned, reading the papers. Greg turned pale. His lawyer looked confused. Greg hadn't even told his own counsel. Mr. Thompson, the judge asked. Is this true? Greg stood up, stammering. It's a private medical matter. It has nothing to do with my love for my son. It has everything to do with it. I shouted, breaking protocol. You didn't come back for love. You came back because you're dying. You want to use him like a lab rat. The judge banged the gavel. Order. Miss Davis, sit down. But the damage was done. The truth was out. I order a recess, the judge said. Counsel in my chambers. Now. In the back room, the judge ripped into Greg's lawyer. You brought a petition for custody without disclosing that the father intends to put the child through a painful medical procedure? This is a massive conflict of interest. Greg's lawyer tried to backtrack. We were going to ask nicely. Once the bond was formed. Ask nicely, I laughed bitterly. He was trying to steal custody so he could force the test. We went back into the courtroom. The judge looked at Greg with pure disgust. Mr. Thompson, your petition for shared custody is denied. Your visitation is suspended pending a psychological evaluation and a full investigation into your finances and medical history. Greg exploded. You can't do this. I'm his father. I'm dying. Doesn't that matter? If you had come to the mother and asked for help, the judge said, maybe it would be different. But you tried to manipulate the legal system to harvest a child you abandoned. Get out of my courtroom. Greg was dragged out by bailiffs, screaming that I was a witch, that I was killing him. I held Leo's hand tight. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. Leo looked up at me. Is he sick? He asked. I knelt down. Yes, baby. Is he going to die? Leo asked. I don't know, I said truthfully. But that's not your fault. And it's not your job to save him. Leo nodded. I don't want to see him again, Mom. You don't have to, I promised. Never again. But the story didn't end there. Greg, desperate and running out of time, went to the press. He sold his story to a tabloid. Cruel mother lets father die. Son is the only match. Reporters started camping out on my lawn. People on the internet called me a monster. How can she deny a dying man? They wrote. They didn't know the hospital story. They didn't know about the $500. They only saw the sob story Greg spun. My business started getting bad reviews. People canceled orders. I was being tried in the court of public opinion and I was losing. We have to fight back, Sarah, my assistant said. You have to tell your side. I don't want to drag Leo into this, I argued. He's already in it, Claire, she said. They are posting his picture online. He was right. I agreed to an interview with a local news station. I sat in my living room holding the hospital bill from 7 years ago, the one I had framed as a reminder of my survival. I told them everything. I told them about the C-section. About him leaving for coffee and never coming back. About the check. About the years of poverty. When the interview aired, the tide turned overnight. The public fury shifted from me to Greg. The hospital husband became a hashtag. People were horrified. The donations that had been pouring into Greg's GoFundMe page stopped. The comments section turned into a war zone against him. Greg tried to do damage control, but his lies unraveled. His gambling debts were exposed. His previous mistresses came forward. He wasn't a victim. He was a predator who had finally been caught. Months passed. The noise died down. We got a restraining order against Greg. He moved to another state, chasing some experimental treatment or another scam. I stopped checking. Leo continued to play soccer. He continued to get straight A's. He was a happy, normal kid. But one day he asked me a question, Mom, if I was a match. Would you have let me do it? I looked at him. It was the hardest question he had ever asked. Leo, I said. If he had been a good man, if he had been a father, we would have helped him. But he wasn't asking for help. He was demanding a sacrifice. And I will never let anyone take pieces of you to fix themselves. Leo hugged me. I'm glad you're my mom, he said. I'm glad you stayed. I would never leave, I said. Not for coffee. Not for anything. Years went by. Clara's kitchen grew into a franchise. I bought a house. A real house with a yard and a pool. Leo went to high school, then college on a soccer scholarship. On his graduation day, I sat in the stands watching him walk across the stage. He was tall, handsome, and kind. He was everything Greg wasn't. As he took his diploma, I felt a vibration in my pocket. I checked my phone. It was a text from an unknown number. He passed away last night. Alone. Thought you should know. It was likely Greg's sister. I stared at the message. I waited for the grief to hit me. I waited for the anger. But there was nothing. Just a quiet sense of finality. The ghost was finally gone. I deleted the text. I didn't tell Leo. Not today. Today was about his future, not his father's past. At the graduation party, Leo gave a speech. He thanked his coaches, his teachers, and his friends. Then he looked at me. But mostly, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I want to thank my mom. The person who stayed. The person who built a world from nothing so I could stand here today. He raised his glass. To Clara, he said. My mother. My father. My hero. The room erupted in applause. I cried, but they were happy tears. The hospital room felt a million miles away. I walked outside to get some air. The stars were bright. I thought about that scared 24-year-old girl sitting in a wheelchair, waiting for a husband who would never return. I wanted to reach back in time and hold her hand. I wanted to tell her it's going to be okay. You are stronger than you know. And he is doing you a favor by leaving. Greg's departure hadn't been a tragedy. It had been the catalyst. It forced me to become the woman I was today. It forced me to build a life that was unbreakable. I went back inside to the party. The music was loud, the laughter was warm. Leo grabbed my hand and spun me onto the dance floor. We laughed, spinning in circles, surrounded by the family we had chosen, the family we had built. He had left me in a hospital to break me. He had come back to use us. But in the end, all he did was show us exactly who we were without him. Whole. Complete. And victorious. The claim he tried to lay on our lives had been denied once and for all. And the victory tasted sweeter than any cake I had ever baked.